What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new features in iOS 26. We're going to talk about the crazy iPhone 17 leak that went viral, Apple's big AI plans, according to Tim Cook, a crazy AirTag story, and much more. And as always, make sure you guys check out the Apple Den Discord server and also the Apple Den newsletter linked down in the description below. All right, so let's start by talking about what happened this week. So this week, of course, was a break from iOS 26 betas. However, on Tuesday, we did get the final release of iOS 18.6. So if you're still on iOS 18, that was the update that came out this week after more than a month of beta testing. Very minor update. We got some new features for the EU, but for US and pretty much everywhere else, it was just a lot of bug fixes, security fixes, and of course, performance and battery life improvements, which is great. It's by far the most stable build of iOS 18, so that is great to see. However, we did see shortly after that came out, some of these security patches in this update that make it a pretty worthwhile update to go ahead and install on your device. So you can see here, there are more than 20 vulnerabilities that have been patched. And also one of those, Bleeping Computer, this website here, they elaborated more on a major zero-day bug in Google Chrome on Mac and on iOS. So they said this: Apple has released security updates to address a high-severity vulnerability that has been exploited in zero-day attacks targeting Google Chrome users. Tracked as CVE 2025-6558, the security bug is due to the incorrect validation of untrusted input in the Angle open source graphics abstraction layer. And then they continue to say, the vulnerability enables remote attackers to execute arbitrary code within the browser's GPU process, and it shows exactly how that is done. And what's interesting about this bug is that it also causes crashes in Safari. So it impacts Safari and Google Chrome. It's just that the zero-day attack was in Chrome. So for that alone, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and update all of your iOS 18 devices. That, of course, is most likely already fixed in the latest iOS 26 beta. If not, it will be fixed in the next beta that comes along. Okay, so now let's talk about iOS 26. So currently the latest version is beta 4. So iOS 26 beta 4 for developers, aka public beta 1. So if you're on the public beta, the first public beta, it's the same as developer beta 4. We should be seeing beta 5 next week. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But beta 4 was a much needed update because, of course, Liquid Glass is more prominent now, as you can see right here inside of the music application. If we go over to the App Store, this is actually a new splash screen, by the way, in beta 4 that popped up a couple of days after the release. So this is something new that you will see in the App Store, but also in here you will see the Liquid Glass, especially if you go over to like the app section or the Apple Arcade especially, you will see the big difference in Liquid Glass here compared to previous betas. And of course, in my What's New video for iOS 26 beta 4, I did cover a lot of the new features in this update. However, there are even more that have been discovered. So if we go into the passwords section in our settings, the settings for the passwords application, and we scroll down, you can see there's a new toggle here that says allow contacting websites. So that is on by default, and you could read right there what it does. That is a brand new setting here. And also when you go into the actual passwords application and you go into a saved password, so we'll go into this one right here, you'll see that we now have the notes section right there, and you can start typing into that right away. Before, you would only see the notes section if you tapped on edit first. That's when it would appear, but now it shows up before that, which is nice. And of course, one of the best changes in iOS 26 beta 4 is on the lock screen with the notification center, because you can see that the notification center gets darker now as you start scrolling through your notifications so you can read them better. Also, if you go into the phone settings, we now have the screen unknown callers section right here, and this gives you 3 different options. Before, it was just a kill switch on beta 3, but now in beta 4 it's better because you can choose between not screening unknown callers at all, asking reason for calling, which is the new screen callers feature, the new call screening feature I should say, and then also silence, which just sends every unknown number to silence and you don't get to know who it is beforehand. So that is new there. And then also there is something else I want to talk about inside of Safari, because if we go into Safari here and we go to a website that has maybe a longer URL, so here's a long URL and you can see that the text is now smaller smaller so that more of that text can fit in to the address bar right there. So in my initial What's New video, I was showing this feature off, and I had a smaller iPhone next to a bigger iPhone, and a lot of people thought that it was only smaller because I was using the smaller iPhone or the bigger iPhone. They thought it was a difference in screen size, but it's not. The new feature here, it doesn't matter your size, the text will shrink and be smaller if you have a long URL, so it can show more in the address bar. There's also an interesting change in group chats if you have a contact blocked. So somebody posted this over on Reddit, and the Messages application will now warn you if a group chat contains a blocked contact. So we'll show it down there at the bottom. There's also a change in the behavior when you have full screen music on your lock screen and you swipe up to go to your home screen. You can see that it now shows the home screen wallpaper or the lock screen wallpaper as you are scrolling up. Before, it would just keep the music there. So that's a slight little change. However, not everything has been great with iOS 26 Beta 4 because there are quite a few bugs, and I've noticed even more this week than I did last week. So number one, I want to talk about the phone application because I've noticed that the hold assist feature is just completely not working here in Beta 4. So I called Service Center, and I was put on hold, and I was not given the opportunity to, go on hold assist like I was in previous beta. So that appears to be broken. Also, if we go into the clock application, let's go into clock right here, and then we go over to our timers. If you set a timer and then you cancel it or, get rid of it, before it would show your recent timers down at the bottom, but that appears to be gone now. So I'm hoping that's a bug because I actually really liked having those recently used timers down there. Also, I've noticed that screenshots are still broken. So it's been like that since I think beta 2 was when it got really bad, but screenshots now. So if I take a screenshot right here, sometimes it just would not show the interface. Like it would not show me that I took a screenshot at all. Like even if it took the screenshot and it saved it to my photos, I would not get the pop-up or the UI to indicate that I actually took a screenshot. And then there are other things that are pretty small, not really significant, but if we go into the Face ID and passcode section and settings, you can see this just does not look great. I mean, everything is left aligned except for the lock glyph icon right there. So this just looks really weird and really bad. So I'm assuming that is a bug and that will be fixed as well, hopefully in the next beta. But once again, until we get to the RC, you are expecting to see a lot of, small bugs like that. So that's what a beta is all about. And it's up to us to report those issues and feedback. And also it's up to us to just be patient and not take everything as like it's supposed to be final. Like a lot of people seem to think that because we're on a beta, everything should work like a final release. That's just not the case. And the reason a lot of people might be thinking that is because there are a lot of brand new beta testers who've never tested beta software before. This is their first go around. And we actually got some insight into that and basically some confirmation of that because Tim Cook during the Apple earnings call said that iOS 26 betas are the most popular yet. And I think that is large in part due to the redesign because last year, obviously betas last year were free for anybody as well. They weren't paid, but there wasn't a ton of hype. There weren't a ton of new people on the betas last year compared to previous versions. But this year, I can tell you from my videos and just the comments, just, being in this industry, like I can tell you there's a big difference in the amount of people using the betas. There are a lot of new people this time around. And that's why I make these videos. And I always say to report the bugs in the feedback app and don't expect things to be perfect because that is how beta software works. And speaking of Tim Cook also said that Apple is making good progress on the personalized Siri features. So he said this during the earnings call, we're making good progress on a more personalized Siri. And as we've said before, we expect to release these features next year. Now, he didn't say exactly what version, but as we've heard before, this is most likely going to be iOS 26.4, which comes in the spring. So expect spring of 2026 to finally see the more personalized Siri, the Siri that can, do things inside of other applications, all of that. That should be coming pretty soon. I say soon, but it's going to be the 0.4 release. And speaking of Apple Intelligence, Bloomberg reports that Tim Cook held a rare all-hands meeting at Apple Park to rally the staff around Apple's AI ambitions and the product pipeline. And what's interesting is that Tim Cook called AI as big or bigger than the internet or the iPhone. And he was saying that Apple must do this, Apple will do this. So basically he admitted that Apple was late to AI, but he reminded employees that it's rarely first. Like Apple is rarely first to do anything, but it still wins by redefining categories. He also mentions that Apple hired 12,000 people last year with 40% in research and development, and also confirmed major investment in custom AI chips and servers. And Craig Federighi did chime in as well, and he talked about the major Siri overhaul, saying that Apple scrapped a hybrid AI approach in favor of a full rebuild, which I have to say, I think that will turn out to be the right move. I think these delays are super annoying. Everybody's talking about Apple, but in the end, I think it was probably the right call, and we will see that with due time. Now, going back to iOS 26 Beta 4 here, I want to talk about the performance and the battery life. Just a brief update on that before we talk about what's next. I don't really have too much to say here, so I'll keep this very short because it's not much different than what we talked about last week. I will say Beta 4 has resolved a lot of the micro stutters that I had on Beta 3. However, the underlying performance, the raw performance, is still not that much better than Beta 3. You can absolutely still tell this is a beta. There's lag, there's app crashes. I did have one random respring this week, but it was when I was doing a lot of things and I was getting a call at that time. So the call is actually what triggered the respring. It froze up a lot and then it resprung. So, there's a lot of instances where you can still tell this is clearly a beta, and it's probably not going to get much better until close to the RC, if not the RC itself. And same goes with the battery life. So if I pull up my main device here, you can see battery life this week, I've been using a lot, 240%, 246%. I've been using my phone a lot, but regardless of that, the battery life has been about the same as it was in Beta 3, unfortunately. I thought it'd be a little bit better with Beta 4, and maybe it is. Maybe it's just a smidge better, but it's absolutely not a big noticeable difference going from Beta 3 to Beta 4. So I'm really hoping that battery life does improve before the RC. But again, it's probably going to take until the RC. All right, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So next up is going to be iOS 26 Developer Beta 5 and Public Beta 2. So I would expect both of those to be released next week. So the week of August 4th, if not on August 4th itself. Now, Apple did just release software on a Tuesday last week. So Tuesday is also in play for next week, but it seems like Apple loves the Monday. So I would say Monday or Tuesday, the 4th or the 5th, is when we can expect to see the 5th beta for iOS 26 and Public Beta 2. And then after Beta 5 is when we should be switching over to a weekly release schedule. So we should have weekly betas for a few weeks until we get close to that final release, and we have a couple of week gap in between down there. But for the next few betas, we should be seeing them every single week, which is always exciting. And that's usually when we start seeing more battery life and performance improvements as opposed to features getting added. Now, I do also want to mention that iOS 26.1 Beta 1 is also possible to come very soon. Now, I say possible, but I would give it less than a 50% chance. And the reason for that is because last year we did see iOS 18.1 Beta 1 before iOS 18 officially released. We actually saw that, I believe, in late July, we saw iOS 18.1 Beta 1. Now, I believe the reason for that is because we saw the Apple Intelligence features. Apple wanted to get ahead and get the beta testing going for a while for the new Apple Intelligence features. But given that we don't really have any new Apple Intelligence features with 26, it's hard to see why Apple would release a 26.1 Beta 1 before the final release of iOS 26. It's possible, like I said, but I think last year was kind of an anomaly because of the Apple Intelligence features. All right, so now let's move on to some more Apple news from this week. And this week we got a massive leak. I don't really want to call it a leak because it was not really a leak, but that's just the best way of framing this. Well, let me just show you. So this week we saw somebody spot a test development iPhone 17 out in the wild in San Francisco. And that sure looks like the new iPhone 17 Pro or 17 Pro Max, because if you see the position of the flash and the LiDAR scanner all the way over there to the left, on top of each other with a gap in between, that's the first time we've seen that design on any iPhone, and that's what all the dummy units and all the leaks have shown for the upcoming iPhone 17 or iPhone 26, whatever it's going to be called. This sure looks legit, and even Mark Gurman pointed out that this does in fact look legit. And this is pretty rare because I cannot remember the last time in recent memory where we saw a iPhone before it even got announced spotted out in the wild. Now, of course, everybody remembers the old Gizmodo story with the iPhone 4 and how that leaked at the bar. That was a completely different beast. That was a once in a lifetime. We're never going to see a story like that again with a pre-release iPhone. But this is still pretty rare. Now, a lot of people, jumped on and said, this guy's going to get fired. That's crazy. Apple's going to take this down. Apple's going to fire this guy. But to me, I'm like, well, that's the point of a test development iPhone. So Apple, if you take a look at this phone, it's concealed. Like they have this thick case on it. There is a protective screen protector on the front, so you couldn't even see the software. Apple was concealing this product. They were trying to, make it be hidden in plain sight. Why would they do that unless they knew it was going to be seen by the public? So this is very similar to what car manufacturers do with cars, where they put a big wrap on a car that's, before it gets announced or before it gets released. They will, drive around on public roads with this wrapped car so they can do real world testing. I think that's exactly what Apple's doing right here. They're doing real world testing with this phone, but it's concealed, so it's not super obvious unless it's a bunch of nerds on the internet like us who know what's coming next. Pretty much nobody is going to notice that that's a new unreleased iPhone or that that's even an Apple employee, because you can see he's not wearing anything that says Apple. He's kind of incognito. And with that in mind, you have to think that for the past several years, there's probably been a lot of people who spotted or saw an iPhone out in the wild that was actually an unreleased iPhone at the time, but it just looked the same. I mean, think about it. Since for the past several years, the iPhones have looked very similar, at least on the back, the camera bump, which is really all you can see when you have all this concealed, the case and everything like that concealing the identity of the phone. The really the only thing you have to go off of is the case and the sensors in the back. And those have been so similar for so long that if somebody were to spot that in public, they probably wouldn't even know it was a new phone. But now that the iPhone 17 or iPhone 26 looks so different, it was spotted, and now people care that it is something brand new that's, spotted out in public. So I thought this was cool. A lot of people thought it was fake or AI or stage or something like that, but I just don't see that. I think this is fully legit, and I think this is actually very normal. He's probably not the only one out there who's using that phone out in the public right now. And speaking of the iPhone 17, we also saw all of the colors for all of the models leak this week. So you can see over on X, Sonny Dixon post this. He said the first look at iPhone 17 color dummies, the new orange really stands out this year, which I agree. Now, a lot of people messaged me saying this orange looks terrible. Why would Apple make it so saturated and such a standout color like that? And I would have to tell you that since this is a Pro model, it's going to be on the Pro and Pro Max, it's going to look very different from how these dummies look. If you go back and look at every single, dummy unit from the past, you will see that the color shade itself is very different from the final product. The color is usually accurate. It's just the shade that's different. So I do think that we are going to see an orange iPhone Pro and Pro Max this year. Thank goodness. I've been waiting on that forever, but it's not going to look like you see in the dummy units. It's going to look better. It's probably going to be more polished, probably going to be a little bit deeper, a little more subtle, but we'll see. If Apple is actually using aluminum, we could actually see more color in the Pro models for the first time really ever. But it's not all good news for the iPhone 17 lineup, because we also heard this week, according to an investor note by Jefferies analyst Edison Lee, that all iPhone 17 prices across the board are going to be increased by $50. So I think a lot of people for the past couple of years have been expecting a price increase. So I don't think this should come as much of a surprise to anybody, but it will be interesting to see how that price increase is perceived when these actually get announced. And speaking of money, we have to talk about Apple's earnings report from this week, because Apple did report their earnings, and they reported their biggest revenue growth since December 2021. And this is for Q3, by the way, but you can take a look at the different revenue broken down right here. So iPhone, Mac, iPad. I think the one that stands out the most to me is Mac revenue. So Mac revenue went from, is expected to be 7.26 billion. It turned out to be 8.05 billion. And the Mac business actually grew the fastest out of any of Apple's units during the June quarter, growing nearly 15%. So 8.05 billion is a nice beat right there. And I think that's because Apple did release the updated MacBook Air. And of course, a lot of people were also rushing to get these new Macs and these new iPhones and everything before tariffs, caused everything to spike up. If you guys remember that, I think that's honestly a big reason why Apple had such a good quarter, is because a lot of people freaked out about tariffs increasing prices, which if you guys remember back then, when that was all happening, I said, don't worry about it. It's not actually going to happen. The prices aren't going to go up crazy amounts anytime soon. So yeah, that's turned out to be accurate. And we did not really see any type of major price increase for the iPhone 16 lineup, but it helped Apple with sales, I guess. That fear helped a lot of people, helped Apple get some sales because of the fear. And we have to talk about this as well, because it seems like every week I'm talking about Apple losing some of its top AI talent to Meta and Mark Zuckerberg. And we saw that again this week. So according to Bloomberg, a fourth Apple AI expert has left Apple for Meta. And this time it was Bowen Zhang, who was a team member at the Foundation Models team, and he's now joining Meta's Superintelligence Labs. And these employees are following the team leader, the AI team leader from Apple, Ruming Peng, who left Apple because he got lured to Meta with $200 million in compensation. So a $200 million pay package. I think somebody would be crazy to not take that. So I don't disagree with him there. But for the other Apple AI employees, we don't really know the exact amounts they're getting paid, but they are leaving, Apple to go to Meta specifically for the money, it seems like. Or maybe they know something we don't, and that Meta is just way ahead with everything AI that they're working on. I guess time will tell. It's going to take a while to see that, but that could also be part of the case. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story, but this time it's not really a crazy story. It's not actually a story at all. It's actually a new product announcement, because Skechers, yes, Skechers, who makes the shoes, they just announced a new Find My Skechers product. So these shoes look like normal Skechers, but they come with a hidden AirTag compartment in the sole of the shoe. So this is cool because you can easily track your kid if they don't have an iPhone or anything like that, anything with Find My. And I think what makes these so appealing is that they just look like normal shoes. It doesn't indicate to anybody on the outside that these are like an Apple product or that Find My is built into these shoes. It doesn't make it clear because it's hidden. And I think that's kind of cool. And as you can see on their website, it's now buy one, get one half off. So if you do have kids and this is something interesting to you, I will leave a link down in the description below so you can go ahead and get those. And I'm also curious about your thoughts on these. Like, I like the fact that it's actually built in now to the sole. Like, I know people have been putting these in shoes for a long time now. They've just been, shoving them down the side and putting it into the shoe like an old makeshift way. But now that it actually has a compartment built in, I think that's pretty cool if you're trying to track your kid in case they get lost, or if they lose their shoes. Like if they go to like Chuck E. Cheese or something and they lose their shoes and they can't find them, that's another way. You can pull Find My up and find their lost shoes. But regardless, if you have kids, let me know your thoughts on this. I'm curious to see because I don't have kids. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, if you did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. Also, make sure you subscribe for more Apple Weekly episodes just like this one. And of course, stay tuned for all the iOS 26 coverage. That will be exciting. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.